Okay, everyone, we'll get started now, and we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is one in a series of webinars that we're presenting here at NASCIO and that are sponsored by our NASCIO Enterprise Architecture and Governance Program. And we've been at this for a bit. We've been at this for about 3 years now, and a lot of this work related to Agile began with a research project we did with Accenture. And we published a report, we did a webinar, we did conference sessions, and that report was based on interviews we did with 53 different state government leaders from 35 states and territories. And then we also interviewed 25 technology and functional agency executives from 18 states. And all of this was intended to compile and learn from states and territories and our corporate partners as well in an effort to create guidance documents and practical advice for states and territories on how to employ Agile development, but also we're thinking about the Agile enterprise and how do we move into that new paradigm. We're finding every state and territory has got a story to tell, and we're looking for those stories. So we're continuing our recruitment of presenters, and we hope you'll contact us with an interest. Our corporate partners as well may have great stories to bring us in partnership with states and territories. I'm your host. I know many of you already. I want to give you a little background here on our webinars. We did a webinar back in 2017 that included Nebraska and California. We're continuing to grow this portfolio of stories. Today we're going to be talking with State of Idaho and State of Texas, and we've got some great speakers lined up for you. I'm going to introduce our speakers, cover a couple of slides that give additional background, and then turn it over to our speakers. But we are extremely pleased to have these people with us here today. We have Josh, is the Bureau Chief for Automation Integration within Idaho's Department of Health and Welfare, Self-Reliance Programs Division. Josh has filled critical leadership roles in Idaho's in-house technology and software development activities for the past 4 years. Over the past 6 years, he's filled operational and support positions in the Idaho Child Support Program. He's an avid champion of Agile and ensures a close coordination with operational readiness for all automated functionality. Prior to joining the state of Idaho, Josh worked in the private sector and also served 4 years as an officer in the U.S. Coast Guard. Josh, we're really glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
Cliff Luckey, Director of Social Services Applications, Information Technology, Texas Health and Human Services Commission. Cliff leads the Social Services Application Development Organization for Texas Health and Human Services Commission and provides IT strategic direction and is always looking to achieve desired business outcomes. The teams he supports develop and maintain widely used large-scale web-based applications serving millions of external users and thousands of internal users. He led the effort to move the IT organization in the successful transformation from waterfall to 100% Agile methodology, culture, and mindset. He did that in 17 months. He supports 30 Agile Scrum teams, all operating in parallel each month. Now, to accomplish all of this, he employs the best methodologies and approaches, including Kanban, Scrum, XP Agile, Lean Agile, DevOps, and many other approaches. So previously, Cliff held positions as the Executive Vice President and CTO for McLean Advanced Technologies in Temple, Texas, and was Vice President of Engineering and CTO for Interland in Atlanta, Georgia. Cliff, we're really glad you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
And we have Keir Buckhurst. He is an old friend of ours here at NASCIO. We've been working with Keir for, gosh, over 2 years, I think, Keir. We did all this research with Kier's help and great leadership, and Kier is Managing Director in Accenture's Public Service Practice. He specializes in systems integration work for government, education, and nonprofit clients. Since 2015, he's served as the North America lead for technology consulting at our health and public service clients in Northeast U.S. Kier has more than 20 years experience in design, deployment, and operations of technology solutions for government. Kier, thanks for coming back. Okay.
Of course.
I want to cover a couple of slides here, just in the way of background. When we look back at our annual surveys, look back to the 2016 survey, we asked this question: do you anticipate increased use of Agile or incremental software development approaches in your state within the next 12 to 24 months? And this is the response we got from our state and territorial CIOs. 81% definitely yes. And then we move on to our 2017 annual survey, and we ask the question of our same constituents: how would you characterize the use of Agile or incremental software development approaches within your state? And you'll see here 10% widespread use subject to centralized oversight. 37% widespread use but not subject to centralized oversight. So we've got 47% that are well on their way, 34% are running pilots, 17% limited use. But it's parameters like this that tell us we need to be addressing this whole concept area of Agile. And then every year we do a top 10 priorities for our state CIOs. Agile has been showing up on that list for 3 years. This year it's number 10. 2017 it was number 9. 2016 it was number 9. So this is a very relevant subject for states. We're glad you're here. And again, we're continuing to recruit for future presentations, other states and territories, and all of this is intended to spread the knowledge and provide opportunities to learn from each other. So we're asking all of you to be as involved in this presentation as possible. We'd like as much interaction as you're willing to give us. And we ask that you use the chat to everyone for posing your questions. And then that way everyone can see what's being asked. And sometimes people respond to others' questions. So it's all good. It's all part of the discussion and interaction. So please use chat, and we'll have more directed attention to those questions toward the end of this presentation. But we do have some slides to start things off. And we're going to have Cliff begin. So Cliff, again, thank you, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. HHSC Social Services Applications started the Agile journey about 3 years ago. It was out of necessity. There were a few things that were going on that led us towards the Agile model. Our waterfall SDLC had become unsustainable, and it was a bit problematic. And a couple of things that were happening was our large-scale applications were taking too long to build and deploy. Also, we started getting changes late in the application development right prior to deployment, and it negated a lot of the previous methodical testing that we had done in the waterfall life cycle. So we did systems integration testing, performance testing, UAT testing, and then all of a sudden these changes came in right before we were going to deploy, and we had to start developing again. So the thing that happened as a result of that was we started getting escape defects into production. And I think all of you that are in software development knows that's the last thing we want. So another thing that happened was, to no fault of their own, the relationship between business and IT had become a bit strained. We discovered it really wasn't a people problem, it was a process problem. So we all got together, business got together with IT, and we started to ask ourselves some questions. And just before I get through these slides, I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I'm not saying bad stuff about Waterfall. We sent a man to the moon with Waterfall. It's a great SDLC. It's been around a long time. I'd certainly continue to use Waterfall if I was building a skyscraper. But for software development, I believe that the market has adopted Agile as being the best SDLC to model yourself after. So what I would recommend for people that are getting together and they're thinking about this Agile journey on a large scale is that business, legal, contracting, procurement, IT, applications, all the folks get together and they ask themselves some questions. And I think it needs to be open and honest dialogue with one another as to what our problems are, and then can we accept that we've got an issue and then move from the problem to the solution. So I'm going to go over about 7 questions we asked ourselves, and you certainly don't have to have yes or no to all of these, but what it does, it has your organization really thinking about where you're at in your ability to develop software on a large scale. So the first one is extended delivery times. From the time that you do a concept until you actually do the deployment, in many instances, waterfall can take 12 to 15 months. So if that's happening, then that's something that you may want to take a look at. Most of our business partners with federal and state mandates, legislative mandates, we have to react quickly. We have to put changes in quickly. We can't wait a year to add functionality or enhancements to software. And then I've already talked about extensive late changes in the development cycle. I do think that leads to escape defects to production. So it's a non-conformance quality issue. Are you having defects being discovered by your customers versus you and your testing process? And then is there a lack of collaboration between your business partner and your customers and the people who are building your applications and supporting your technology environments? And do you start to sense that IT teams and business teams are not really aligned with the same strategic objective? Are you having some unsuccessful deployments of applications, or when you're putting functionality into deployment? What is your rate of defects that come back after you do deployments? And then are you exceeding your costs and your budgets for your projects? And then are you creating a lot of excessive documentation, such as big, long BRDs that were done a year ago, or CRDs, or a lot of documentation that's not adding any value to the business and often never read again once they're created? So if you're experiencing some of these things, you may want to have an honest, open discussion with your organization. I think it needs to be done at the organization level. Everybody needs to have this open discussion. And if some of these things are happening to you, then I think Agile may be something that you want to look at a large scale. So there's a lot of myths out there about Agile. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'd like to get through some slides quickly, but I would like to pick a couple of these and talk about them. Agile is not a panacea. It's not a magic wand. It's not going to fix all of your problems. It's hard work. It takes a huge commitment, significant Agile readiness. As Eric said, it took us 17 months before we were able to go to a 100% Agile model. And so it's a significant change to your organization and shouldn't be taken lightly. All the problems that you have are still going to be there. You just solve them in different ways when you use Agile and a different SDLC. A couple of others. Agile can't be used on deliverable-based contracts, and Agile can't be used on fixed-price contracts. I think this is a myth. I think if you work with your vendor partners and you've got a good relationship with your vendor partners as we do, they're just as motivated to deliver a good product as you are. I do think that RFPs should probably be written with an Agile mindset. Also, if you've got some waterfall contracts that you want to convert, is to work with your vendor partners to change and amend those contracts to be more Agile than waterfall. All very possible, and it's done quite commonly throughout our industry. So there's 6 things that I think folks should give strong consideration to. One is unequivocal buy-in from the top, and I'm talking about from your leadership, from your CIOs, all your executive vice presidents, all your deputy commissioners. Everyone in state government needs to be on board and have unequivocal buy-in and support for changing the way we do business, because a lot's going to change. There's going to be a lot of naysayers out there that don't want to change, and you must have top-down support in order to be able to move forward in an Agile strategy. The next thing is, number 2, is develop a business plan. Have a strategy guide that is really your roadmap towards getting to Agile. In our instance, we always knew we were going to go 100% Agile and that we would leave Waterfall. And we retired Waterfall in January of 2017, but we did that with a lot of methodical planning. Everybody knew what we were wanting to do and how we were going to accomplishment. I think great organizations, and I've had the pleasure of working with thousands of technology professionals, when I look at great companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all these folks, one of the things that they have in common is that everyone in the entire organization knows what the strategy is, they know what the goals are, they know where they want to go, and you can ask anyone in those organizations, what's your strategy, what makes you different, what makes you better than your competitors, and they all know the answer to that. So I do believe it is a global transformation, not just an IT transformation. Quick decision making needs to happen. We have probably 40 or 50 product owners on our business side of the house. They make decisions every day about shifting priorities as we're moving along. One of our principles in Agile is flexibility and the ability to change. A lot of those product owners need to be able to make the decisions. Email's not really good for us in Agile. I think many of you know, and it's happened to me, I send an email and ask a question, and I copy a couple people, then they copy 10, then those people copy 20, and by the end of the day, 400 people are looking at that email you wrote, and everybody gets to read that, so it's sort of anti-productive for the Agile world. So we make decisions quickly. We don't wait 2 or 3 weeks to get a policy decision or a decision from a director 1, 2, 3, or 5 to be able to tell us how to progress to the next step. I highly recommend a very rigorous governance process with well-defined methodologies for prioritization of themes and epics prior to starting the sprint work. I've talked about amending contracts as number 5. And then start small. So start with 1 sprint, then try 2 sprints. What we saw happening, and I think you'll see this as well, it rather surprised me, is that after we started our sprints and we did 1 pilot, is word of mouth got around, and all the people that were, and all the different business partners that were using Waterfall, they wanted sprints for themselves. So they started telling their friends, look, we got this no defects, it was quality, we worked with our developers and our IT partners, and we got this deployed in a month or 2 or 90 days. And so word of mouth sort of took off through the organization, and everybody was coming to us saying, hey, can you develop our software in Agile? So that was sort of surprising in state government that happened. And I'm going to move to the rest of these quickly. I'm not going to go into a lot of Agile methods, principles. There's many on there. You can find those on the internet. But I think there are 4 different areas of focus. One is roadmap, making sure that on a monthly basis, that's what we do anyway, on a monthly basis we get together with our business partners and we reprioritize all the themes and epics. As Eric indicated, we have about 32 teams a month, so it takes a lot of coordination to be able to take those themes, turn them into epics, decompose them into user stories, get the acceptance criteria, and start working on them. One thing that's really important to remember is our requirements are not stale. So we start developing our requirements and we go into our discovery phase 2 weeks before we start the sprint. We have 4-week sprints. So 2 weeks prior to that, business gets together, the product owners get together, we have our discovery analysts, we develop user stories, and we do all of our sprint planning. And then we go into creating our task breakdowns, we're doing story points estimation. All that activity occurs 2 weeks prior to day 1 of the sprint. And then, of course, release. I think you should have some good tools that show you with all the user stories when they're going to release and when they'll deploy. So just break those into 4 different areas, and I think your strategy and your business guide should reflect the roadmap, discovery, sprint process, and the release process. On the next slide, I'm not going to go through all the ceremonies. I think it's a little verbose there, but I would like to highlight a couple of things that we do that have been hugely successful. One is on these stand-up meetings. They literally do last 15 minutes. They are time-boxed to 15 minutes. They don't exceed 15 minutes. The most important thing in a stand-up meeting every morning, and our teams typically get together between 8 and 10 in the morning, is they get together and they're trying to find out what the blocking issues are for them completing their task. and removing those tasks. So that's the most important thing. If there's a tester and developer that are in the sprint and they're having a discussion and they're having a blocking issue, then the Scrum Master will take that offline. And also, if there's policy questions, they'll work with business and the product owners offline. So the most important thing about stand-up meeting is what is blocking the members of the team from completing their task that day. One other thing about this slide is we'd have 2 demos. They're called reviews in Agile. We do one at the end of the 3rd week, and that's where we get our business partners in the room and we demonstrate the work that we've developed over the last 3 weeks. And we want to always meet the definition of done. What we decide we were going to do when we started developing the user stories just a few weeks ago, and then we show them that. We bring up projectors and we show them that. The interim demo is really important, and I think you may want to integrate that into your Agile process because it allows the product owner and business to be able to make changes. We won't take in new scope, but if they want a tweak to some functionality that they're seeing, we've got another week to do that, and we'll do it prior to the final demo, which is at the end of the sprint, at the end of the 4th week. So interim demos and final demos are crucially important so you can demonstrate what you've developed, and all of that needs to be signed off on by the business prior to being ready for deployment. Sprint retrospective is very important. So I've just got a couple of more minutes here, and I certainly want to give Josh is on the business side and has a lot of great things to talk about, so I want to give him lots of time to talk, and we'd like to open this up for questions. But the next slide talks about some things to consider. One is your Agile processes. You should have very, very defined processes. You can imagine if you've got 30, 40, 50 sprint teams or Scrum teams, and they're all doing things in different ways, and they've all got different methods and principles, it can turn into a big mess. So, and I tried it in my younger days. What I would say is if you're going to tailor a process that's different from your traditional process that you've developed in your business plan, make sure all teams do it. Talk about it, and make sure that that process or that method propagates across all teams. You don't want all the Scrum teams doing things in different ways and having different ceremonies. It's just been my personal experience. Technical readiness, I could talk about that in another webinar. Eric, you may want to give that some consideration. DevOps and CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, is very big in the Agile world. We must be able to build environments and containers and platforms in a very swift manner to be able to keep up with the development and the deployment that we do. So technical readiness is probably 50% of an Agile SDLC becoming successful. Organizational readiness, train. I think you have to win over one heart and one mind at a time throughout your entire organization. I spent as much time with business as I did with IT folks. I've trained well over 800 people throughout the HHSC organization. 400 of those folks were on the business side of the house, legal, contracting, procurements. So it's not just an IT training exercise. Resource readiness, make sure that you've got the right tools, that you get people the training, the right certifications. We have many Agile certified practitioners, Scrum Masters, certified Scrum professionals, all very astute in the methods and the principles of Agile. And then cost planning, making sure that your contracts and your pricing models reflect your ability to do Agile in an effective manner. And I'm going to breeze through these last 2 real quick. Please open it up for questions. These are the metrics that you want to look at. Number 1, we don't want escape defects. We want to do everything that we can to keep from putting escape defects into production. We want to track metrics. We look at sprint burn down charts. We do that on a weekly basis. We're looking at cumulative flow diagrams. That's sort of hard for me to say. That's the relationship between development and test, and what's in test and what's ready for deployment. Team velocity is important. That's how many story points a team can get done in any given sprint. However, the only reason you do velocity is not to see how much work you can stick in a Scrum team in 1 month. It's really so they can estimate better. So the next time they go through their story point estimation process, they know how many points they can do. So it's sort of a personal thing for the team and a guide that they use to better estimate future sprints. So those are some of the things that we look at that are really important for tracking metrics. We also do risk management on a weekly basis. All of our sprint teams have scores. We have a risk scoring model where we're looking at the impact and probability of risk. And so we get together, all of our ACPs, our Agile Certified Practitioners get together, we look at the risk, we come up with risk strategies associated for that sprint, associated with that deployment, and then we'll enable or enact one of those strategies to mitigate the risk. The next slide, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Build containers, the old way of data centers building VMs is swiftly being replaced by containerization, infrastructure as code, a tools chain that's integrated. So there's a lot of DevOps tools out there. We do use open source tools. They're highly controlled and secure, but I would start recommending that the tools that we use also adopt some open source tools. I'm certainly not going to promote any, but there's a lot of really good effective tools out there that can be used for Agile. Adopt continuous integration. That means checking in code all throughout the day. Do your builds nightly. Monitor risk. Our testers are part of the sprint team. They're not outside of it. We even bring in UAT into the sprint teams. And so those are just some of the things that you want to do to make sure that you get automation and your continuous integration and development lifecycle. So here's what we've learned. We've got great trust between business and IT. We work together. We're often in the same building working together. We've created probably well over 250 sprints have been completed, thousands of user stories. 140 projects have been deployed into production. We've had multiple applications that have been built from scratch all the way to deployment very successfully within 5 or 6 months versus 2 or 3 years. Looking back on it, it's been hard work. It took a huge commitment from all of our partners, all of our vendors. We always believed we were doing the right thing. We didn't let, if we found a blocking issue, we went around it or we went over it or we talked about it. So all in all, I think it was worth it. We just did a major release. We release deployments every month, once a month, and every 4th month we have a significant release that may have 10 or 15 sprints all combined together for one deployment. And I'm very pleased to announce that we had 0 escape defects in the last major release we did, and I think that that just really goes to show that all the hard work and all the commitment and the passion for everyone that has for Agile and this new SDLC came to fruition. And that's about all I have. I will let you look at the key takeaways, and then the only thing that needs to change is everything, and our mantra here at HHSC is have fun and stay humble. So I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
Very good, Cliff. You have got a great story here, and particularly related to the energy you've got behind it and that you're sustaining. So thank you, Cliff. We're going to move on to a presentation from Josh and then get to the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of these questions as we can, and those we can't hit, we will handle via email. So we will get to all of these questions. The speakers have been kind enough to commit to that. So Josh, let's turn it over to you for a little bit of a different perspective, and that's an emphasis on the business driving the use of Agile. So Josh, over to you, sir.
All right, definitely. Thank you very much, Eric, and thanks, Cliff, as well. Definitely a different approach in Idaho, being business-driven, and also just the size and scale of the Agile implementation varies. Idaho is smaller, which I think in a lot of ways lends to the way we apply Agile and gives us a little more flexibility in that way. So let me kind of go into our history a little bit and just talk about why we even adopted Agile in the first place. We were looking at a project to move off the mainframe to modernize our benefits eligibility system. And so we were looking for something that would really minimize costs, maximize flexibility, and really allow us to move quickly to undergo that whole project. And in a lot of ways, the reason for the business emphasis was, as we're looking around, we had an IT infrastructure that was in place, fully supportive, engaged, but not really configured to do new development or really take on a large-scale project. So that was a limitation in a lot of ways. So the story behind it actually is that, and it precedes my time here. I joined since that time, but the initial people that brought Agile in over 10 years ago, really they went to a presentation. Agile was still relatively new, just at Boise State University. If you're a college football fan, then I'm sure you're familiar with the blue turf. But they saw something they liked and decided, hey, that sounds like a good fit for us. Let's go ahead and try it out and see if that's something we can be successful with. So really, the main benefits that they were looking for was that flexibility that Agile brought. Just a framework that allows you, whether it's a policy change, adjusting for new initiatives or audit findings, whether it's the timelines that shift, you can scope the work with Agile to meet those deadlines by focusing on an MVP. If there's changes in perspectives, you can really tweak the process and workflows to streamline the service delivery aspects of it. If technology changes, if there's an emergent design, it provides you that ability to identify the best technological solutions and really adjust for what your current needs are and not get stuck with something that maybe is already outdated. And let me go ahead and in terms of the highest value first, that really is focusing on that MVP, where you can really start to deliver certain things through those incremental releases. You can inspect and adapt throughout the time and really chart your course as you go. You're not really setting a plot line where you have a start and an end, but you're tracking through that feedback loop and getting to a point where at the end you're delivering something that provides what it is you want when you're at the end, and not something completely different. And really focus on those highest value ones first. And also, there's a perception based on proposals we had for modernizing our system from different vendors and from different outside groups coming in and giving us proposals, that we could have about a third of the cost savings taken off of having that system integrator in place. And so really attractive to say, well, we can do this ourselves. We can organize ourselves using this Agile practice and really make this happen. And we certainly didn't do it alone. We did bring in a lot of Agile coaches that were there to work with teams individually, with individuals, with everyone from leadership on down to the developers themselves, and working to really make sure that they understood the practices, that they adhered to the practices, and stay true to the principles. So just kind of going through our 10 years of Agile experience, our initial project in 2007 to 2009 to get off the mainframe as part of that eligibility system modernization, that started in 2007. It went live in 2009, was fully successful. We entered more of a maintenance period for the period of time after that. But then I'm sure a lot of other people impacted in other states as well, but the Affordable Care Act came along, and with that, a lot of changes. So at first, Idaho went live with the federal marketplace, and then the changes in the policy within the state had to shift to work towards a state-based marketplace. So within that, we took our whole health coverage system and eligibility and combined Medicaid and the tax credits into a single eligibility system. And so having to integrate that APTC tax credits within our Medicaid system was a huge feat and kind of a unique thing. And I really credit Agile with having the flexibility in order to look at how we could do that and how we could incrementally build the pieces of that within our system. And we continue to use Agile today. Since 2016, we've been undergoing, we've kind of gone more in a maintenance mode in a lot of ways with our benefits, and now looking at child support. We just got that system off the mainframe. We basically took all of our mainframe code and put it into more of a Java-like code. So not really modernized fully in the sense that we want it to be, but at least allows us to get some of those cost savings with getting off the mainframe. And now we're undertaking a modernization where we're embarking on building out that modernized system that's going to support us going on to the future. And really across the board, I want to emphasize that we're looking to modernize our systems ongoing. It's something you never really rest with. We're constantly changing and building and growing with the new technologies and needs, whether it's security or just keeping things for our customers and our staff working as we would expect. Just in terms of setup, I know Cliff had mentioned over 30 teams working. Idaho, a little bit smaller scale, and we've adjusted this over time and really flexed with what the needs are. But 5 core Scrum teams working on new software development. We also use Kanban teams since within the Department of Health and Welfare, Division of Welfare, we support benefits as well as child support. So we have different systems for both of those, and so we have separate prod support teams that allow us to react and absorb a lot of the production issues that might arise without impacting the committed development work that we have the Scrum teams working on. We've also combined a team of more, I guess, data experts that can help us centralize data-related queries and fixes and research and things like that. Also with an operational support team of the middlewares, DBAs, et cetera, that really help coordinate all the different environments and releases that need to take place. And then finally, our business team. We have separate business testers on our business side of the business, but we do have them also embedded with the team, with the development teams themselves. So they're looking at that as early as possible to identify, as we're building out that functionality, as we're completing backlogs, that we're looking at it not just from like a QA from a technical perspective of whether the backlog itself is being met, but whether the business aspects of it are being met as well. Just to be able to, as early as possible, identify any types of issues. In terms of our sprints and our releases, we have 2-week sprints. In times of intensity, or when we're trying to get teams set up in more of a agile boot camp, we've gone to 1-week sprints, but that's tedious to maintain and exhausting for a lot of the people that need to maintain that pace. So we've settled into the 2-week sprint cycles. We release generally every 2 to 3 sprints. Generally we'll have some larger releases as well, putting certain functionality behind switches. We don't like to sit on code for any extended period of time. Just want to get it out and deliver it. And really, in a lot of ways, we've seen the business expect that. They've really adjusted their processes to adjust to that regular cadence. In terms of our maturing agile processes, what we've done over the years, really, in order to try to plan more of our work out, we've adopted the Scaled Agile framework, where we can plan out 5 sprints worth of work, and that allows us to at least have a better understanding of what those priorities are. It allows the business visibility to what the prioritized work is. It lets us plan out our testing, the training aspects, the actual operational rollout itself, and so we've seen a lot of value from that. In addition, one of the main things we've heard from our teams is, what is the biggest headache that you face? And a lot of times it's around requirements. So we've implemented this dual-track Scrum model, where we have a cross-functional group of business and IT folks that drive out requirements gathering in advance of the team, with the goal that we still have our product owners that are there representing the business, but if we can at least set up those guardrails, flesh it out well enough in advance, it makes it so that we're that much earlier trying to discover what the requirements are and having the conversations, even though we know that there are going to be questions that come up in our grooming sessions or even in the sprint itself. We also like to use Kanban where most applicable. So there's certain instances, prod support, I mentioned that. Just any time where we need a certain amount of flexibility and the regular Scrum framework doesn't apply, we try to utilize that as well. And also in some instances, we've used engineered solutions in lieu of Agile development. We work with outside vendors, and if there's something that's packaged and we know exactly what we want and needs to be delivered, then we'll try to be open and flexible enough to use those quote-unquote engineered solutions, knowing that there isn't necessarily need for the inspection and adaptation. And I would say, generally as a rule, though, that's rarer since the business does like that flexibility and has embraced Agile in order to allow them to be flexible in terms of what the requirements are and changing those on the fly based on their experience and deeper analysis. Because of the nature that business is driving that Agile and not IT, I'd really say that business or the IT group has grown to embrace those Agile practices. It's something that they really, for the most part, have changed their structure in order to support in a lot of ways. So having the devs and QAs and the Scrum Masters on staff and knowing that they're invested in that framework over time is really kind of giving us a structure and allows IT and the business to really stay in sync. Definitely comes with a certain amount of friction, though. IT, I would say a lot of their value points are towards the sustainability and maintainability of the systems. And the business, typically is going to want it. They want it quality, but they want it fast and they want it cheap. So knowing they're driving towards that, they can result in some different perspectives as we kind of move through and want to deliver things quickly, but knowing that there's going to be a need for some long-term support there. And just to kind of go through again, just real quick, what we find in Idaho is the benefits of the Agile framework is that it does give you that structure that you can fill in and use for software development that really I think applies well and does have a certain longevity to it that allows us to continue to develop and then go back, as opposed to the waterfall method that may not necessarily get us to where we need to go, especially when we don't know what we want. And that ties right into the flexibility, just being able to adjust as much as possible for those changes in policies and customer requirements. Really welcoming any change at any point in the development cycle and timeline, even very, very late. Delivering the high-value functionality in short release cycles. Business representatives tightly integrated within the process to minimize misunderstandings and ensure deliverables meet the customer needs. The low-risk opportunity, just to inspect and adapt. Our regular sprint reviews, that includes IT and business and testers and VAs. I mean, it gives us a chance to take a half an hour every 2 weeks or whatever the case may be and look at what's being delivered and make quick adjustments so we know we're delivering the right thing. And really just being able to deliver that minimum viable product, knowing that there is some core functionality no matter how far we go or the funding goes or anything else, that will deliver something of value and it won't be all completely lost. And then also what I've seen, since I'm less in the funding of the Agile and the different procurement aspects, I'm more in the operational delivery, but I see great cross-functional collaboration between all these different folks, whether it's business and IT, outside vendors, people of different technical abilities all coming together, bringing their different perspectives, and ultimately delivering and making the whole process successful. So, yeah, with that, I think that's kind of I'm going to take up all the time if I don't shut up here quickly, because I know there's a lot of questions that folks may have. So with that, I'll wrap it up.
Actually, there's a lot of questions that are coming across here, and Kier has been fielding them. And then we've got Cliff has been responding as well. I'm going to let all that energy continue, and we are, as I stated earlier, we're going to take this chat box and put all of these into a document and then look through and see what wasn't answered, and then we'll put another column over to the right and we'll get our speakers to respond, and then we'll send that out to everybody. But I want to ask a few questions here that I don't see yet on the coming across from the chat box, and let's start with you, Josh. Now, you talked a lot about Agile, this drive from the business, and IT side of the house has actually changed in their reception and energy as well. But here's a question. How has Agile impacted the business culture, particularly in regard to training, prioritization of work? Have you seen Agile influence how work is done on the business side?
It really have. I mean, it's changed over time, and the individuals on the business side who have embraced Agile and have worked in that culture, especially when we've been practicing it for over 10 years. It's really been ingrained in a lot of ways. But folding it into the processes on the business side as well. It's not just for software development. We see it where the trainers themselves and the process engineers that are writing process for the field and writing release notes for new functionality coming out. I mean, they're participating in these processes. They're aligning their work and their delivery of their work along with the sprint cycles and the release dates and implementation dates. So even the leadership itself engaging in that prioritization exercises, looking at business value and time costs, and I think really we've just invested in the sense that we know that there's going to be small delivery of things that will get us to where we need to go, and it just really does infiltrate. And you do need that kind of investment in order to make it work. They understand the Agile practice, they understand the Agile delivery, and so in a lot of ways it kind of manages expectations for what they'll get and when, and so they're invested in that way.
So is it causing professionals on the business side to even challenge what they're doing, what some of their current processes are, and possibly reinvent, re-engineer things just based on this attitude of continual change?
Well, I think so. I mean, even the nature, and maybe it's the dynamic individuals that we work with, they're always looking for a better way of doing it. They want to be successful, whether it's on our benefits side where we're doing service delivery, or whether it's on the child support side where we're trying to increase the way we handle our customers. But yeah, I definitely see that where they're open to change. They'll try new things. They'll inspect and adapt. I mean, just that whole philosophy, I think, does make a difference, because they see that you can try things, and you can adjust things, and they might fail, but at least you tried it and rather than just saying, oh, no, this is the dogma, it's the way we've always done it, and just accepting that. And that flexibility, whether it's within our business itself or even within our larger political framework, we're kind of given that leeway to adjust and to move freely to try to improve what we're doing.
Well, that spirit of experimentation is something that must come from leadership, and a term that Cliff used in his presentation was this idea of unequivocal leadership buy-in is essential. Cliff, regarding that term you used, unequivocal leadership buy-in is essential, what specific actions were taken to convince business and IT leadership to adopt and transition to Agile development?
Good question, Eric. So what we did was we took the opportunity to go meet with as many people that would listen to us, and specifically I met with the CIO's office and the CIO and also the deputy executive commissioners on the business side of the house to really talk to them about the value of Agile and why this could change and help us move from some of the problems we had to some of the solutions. So I did it one entity at a time, one person at a time. Probably spent well over a year going out, getting in my car, going and meeting with people, and then the proof's in the pudding. It really came down when we actually started those pilot sprints. Did we deliver what we said we were going to do? Did we have quality software in a timely and efficient manner? And once we proved that with one sprint, 2 sprints, and we continue to prove that with 30 simultaneous teams, then everything we said actually came to bear. So it's about communicating, over-communicating, listening. There's going to be a lot of objections. We welcomed those objections. Sometimes those objections helped us really think about what we were doing, and we changed course at times. So be as open to criticism and as open to the people who are saying this will not work. Those are the people you want to pay close attention to, because some of your best ideas can come from those conversations. Does that make sense, Eric?
It does. And then as you're moving through that evolution, obviously leadership made decisions to embrace Agile. And you had these 30 teams evolving, but what specific actions or approaches, strategies did you use to ensure a readiness across the organization? Did you have any kind of enterprise-wide training or overviews of we're going to make a change here, folks, and here's what it's all about? What did you do in that area in terms of organizational readiness, Cliff?
Yeah, good question. So we socialized the plan and all of our Agile process guides. We started to conduct 2-hour classes on Agile fundamentals. We did that for everyone who was involved in the process. As I'd indicated earlier, we trained well over 800 people. We did bring in some outside training for the product owners for developing user stories. We also have many tools that we brought in that are Agile tools, and we did specific training with those. Everyone pitched in to make sure that everyone knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we were doing it. So it was a lot of hands-on work. I don't think you can, I think the most important thing I learned is I can't just go to a vendor and say, hey, make Agile happen. I think there needs to be within the state a sponsor and somebody that's driving it through the organization and that's mitigating all those risks and overcoming all those obstacles from the state side. We are the systems integrator for all of our software development for our eligibility systems. We don't really leave it up to anyone else. So you have to take a very active role. You can't just delegate it to a vendor or to someone else. You have to roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Kara, I want to pull you into this series of questions. You know, as you've worked across the country and nonprofits, government, and that type of thing, in terms of that organizational-wide or that enterprise-wide buy-in and readiness, have you found that you've had an important role to play there, maybe coming in as an independent, objective consultant? Can you speak to that, Kara?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd first start by seconding some of the comments that Josh and Cliff have just made, but also I thought Cliff's comment at the beginning during his presentation was one I've seen myself and I've heard from a lot of CIOs across the U.S. too. It's like once you have that initial success with a pilot, you know, at one agency or in one part of an agency, that leads to interest from other areas of the organization and frankly across the state. So there's a lot of value, and you know, you pick that right first project that's got an engaged business sponsor who really understands it and supports you, like Cliff was just saying. And then once you prove the value, you're going to have people knocking on the door trying to do more of it. You'll get a lot of questions about, you know, how can I have what they're having? Because I see the value. I see how quickly things came. I see that there's, you know, you're spending money on the right things and you've got something to show for it. And that just sells itself. So that is the biggest part is get those pilots going, sort of show that success, and then it's going to be straightforward from there.
Very good.
You know, but I think getting the business sponsor on board is critical. There was one CIO who said to me that it took him, you know, almost a month in ongoing conversations to convince his tax commissioner to move forward. But once he did that, he said it just changed the relationship entirely. It was behind him 110%, removed roadblocks for the CIO and for the project, got them additional funding they needed. It just, you know, really can transform the relationship.
Very good. Now, you're not going to convince everybody, maybe not immediately, and there's different teams and even organizations within state government that are maybe still on-ramping. Josh, over to you, please. How do you integrate outside partners and customers who are not currently practicing Agile? How do you bring them into this cadence of development when you've got multiple Scrum teams running, and they may have to interact, or they're touching other parts of the organization that aren't on board yet, or maybe are so far down the road with a waterfall methodology that may be very close to delivering? How do you integrate with activity like that when you're trying to keep your Scrum teams moving ahead?
You know, it requires just a lot of communication and coordination, understanding what that timeline looks like, so you know whether as you're going through the development cycle, where everyone is at in terms of when you can test in your different layers of environments in the non-production, when you're in your UAT period, when you're going to release, and inevitably when those timelines change, be able to communicate freely across those groups and get together and make sure that all those connection points are maintained. We try to give enough visibility to our Agile cadence so that we can kind of overlap with any of those partners and make sure that we're coordinating. And then the other aspect is just really investing in end-to-end testing. We find that wherever those interfaces or files are being transferred or anything else, that we're testing those with the new functionality, and that we're got all our environments pointing in the right direction. I mean, it might be tedious, but even if it's just a 15-minute call with those different groups as we're in the process, just to touch base and to talk through all those issues, we found that communication is really key.
Very good. And Cliff, I want to pull you in this discussion in a little bit different angle. Something that we talked about is you've got all of these teams running in parallel, and certainly beyond each particular Scrum team's deliverables and managing their sprints. You've got multiple sprints running at the same time. How do you mitigate the risks across all of those teams and ensure product quality at the end, and that things interoperate, that in fact these Scrum teams are not acting independently, that they're not working as an island, but in fact you are moving in the direction of the enterprise as a whole?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And Kathy, I think it's Kathy Bromede, had asked a similar question, is when you've got these fully integrated systems that are very large and complex, and they all integrate with one another, how can you possibly develop code and coordinate everything? So the answer is complex, but the simple answer is that the teams need to be integrated. So if I have two different application teams, and one is doing the eligibility system or the online self-service portal, and the other team is doing the task list management, which is another module or another application completely separate, those teams must interact with each other, and they'll have different developers. They'll swap developers. So you may have one developer that may be a state staff that may be integrated fully with another sprint team that's run by a vendor sprint. So you have to integrate fully the people working together first and foremost. Secondly, one of the big things that we do is right before we go to deployment, we do something where we get the developers and the testers in a room together every single day at 3 o'clock. We open up all the defects. We look at the severity of those defects. We assign those to a developer, or they go back to a tester to be retested. So that cadence happens across all applications on a daily basis right prior to deployment. And so that's something that I would recommend implementing, is that you bring everybody together for a daily scrum of scrums together, so that you can look at the defects and then mitigate and fix those defects. Otherwise, you're going to take defects into production. So we do not go into production unless all of the defects have been eliminated and all of the systems, the integrated systems, fully function with one another.
Very good. Kiera, I want to kind of look at a more of a national perspective from your experience. What are you seeing in terms of successful ways of bringing all these parallel teams together to ensure they're not creating solutions that don't interoperate properly? What sort of orchestration, choreography is going on that works really well in your experience?
I would say that it feels like states are still experimenting with some different methods around this. And I see there have been a couple of questions around procuring and contracting as well. I feel like there's some areas where states are still looking at what works best in a public service environment for this, and so we're trying different methods. It feels like we're going to want to continue to take a look at what's working, and I see a lot of states sort of looking at other states and seeing what's what's working, what's not, and what can they take advantage of. it is definitely a challenge, I think, that a lot of states are facing right now.
Very good. We're at the top of the hour, a little bit past, but Cliff, Josh, Kier, thank you very much for being here today. And to those who have attended, we really appreciate you being here. Stay tuned. There's more of these kinds of sessions coming forth. And then we'll go through the chat dialogue here and make sure everything is answered by our speakers. So with that, everyone, we want you to stay tuned to NASCIO and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.